In the world of high-stakes geopolitics, the most dangerous thing for a superpower isn't a strong rival. It's the absence of one. History shows us that global powers don't just react to enemies, they require them. Without a clear other, a superpower's global architecture begins to crumble. Alliances lose their purpose. Bases in foreign lands become harder to justify. The very glue that holds a global order together starts to dissolve. This is the enemy factory. It is the strategic process where global powers identify, inflate, or even manufacture a peer competitor to maintain their own dominance. Today, we aren't looking at small-scale conflicts. We are looking at the big game, how the global powers use the enemy narrative to stay at the top. Welcome to the high-stakes world of interstate realism. Let's look at why, in 2026, peace is a luxury that global powers simply cannot afford. In geopolitics, an alliance is rarely built on friendship. It is almost always built on a shared fear of a specific, identifiable threat. This is called external balancing. For a superpower to keep its junior partners in line, those partners must feel that they need protection. If the threat disappears, the alliance becomes an expensive relic. Look at Roman Empire. It faced an existential crisis because the enemy was gone. Today, we see the same pattern. New enemies are being defined to pull nations into new security blocks by manufacturing a sense of imminent threat. A global power ensures that its allies remain dependent on its military umbrella and technology. This isn't just about safety, it's about alignment. When you create an enemy, you force the rest of the world to pick a side. A superpower that cannot point to a monster on the horizon is a superpower that loses its seat at the head of the table. The enemy justifies the presence of fleets in distant oceans and the control of strategic choke points. Without the threat of the other, these patrols look like occupation. With the threat, they look like security. This is the first law of the enemy factory: never let a common threat go to waste. If it doesn't exist, you must create it through rhetoric. It's about securitization, taking a normal competition and framing it as an existential struggle for survival. But keeping allies together is only half the battle. The other half is keeping the superpower's own engine running. Comparison of military spending graphs between the global powers. To remain a superpower, you need a military that is generations ahead. But that level of spending requires a massive justification. Enter threat inflation. This is the practice of overstating the capabilities or intentions of a rival power to ensure funding and focus. In 2026, the military-industrial complex is a trillion-dollar machine. It doesn't just respond to threats, it predicts them into existence. If the rival's technology is portrayed as equal or surpassing, it triggers a race. That race is what fuels the superpower's innovation. Historically, gaps have been used to mobilize resources at a scale impossible in peacetime. The enemy provides a singular, focused goal for the entire state apparatus, industrial, technological, and educational, without a rival to beat. A superpower's research and development becomes aimless. It loses its cutting edge. Look at the space race. It wasn't about science, it was about proving that one enemy was superior to the other. Today, that same energy is channeled into semiconductors, quantum computing, and space weaponization. By manufacturing an enemy, a superpower can also justify extraterritorial actions, intervening in third-party countries to contain the rival. Every proxy war, every trade tariff, every export control is framed as a defense against the manufactured monster. In this game, the rival's actual strength matters less than their perceived threat level. The factory works overtime to ensure the public and the policymakers are always one step away from panic. But what happens when two enemies start to look at each other and realize they both need the conflict? Global powers often exist in a state of mutual necessity. They need each other to justify their own existence. In this 2026 landscape, the enemy is a tool for decoupling, breaking the world into two distinct economic and technological ecosystems. If you can convince the world that the other side is an existential threat, you can force them into your ecosystem. This is strategic autonomy. By manufacturing an enemy, you eliminate the middle ground. You force middle powers to choose. Smaller powers are squeezed. They are told that neutrality is weakness and that they must align with a superpower for security. His ensures that the superpowers remain the suns around which all other nations must orbit. Follow the enemy narrative, and you'll see it's a tool for maintaining a bipolar or unipolar world. It prevents the rise of a third power bloc. By keeping the world focused on the grand rivalry, they keep it under their control. But this is a dangerous game. Threat inflation has a way of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you spend decades calling someone an existential threat, eventually, you might start believing it. And then, the Cold War turns hot. The factory can manufacture the enemy, but it can't always control the war. As we move deeper into 2026, the factory is finding new materials. The enemy is no longer just a state, it's an ideology or a system. We see the rise of digital sovereignty. The enemy is now in the software, the algorithms, and the data. But the logic remains the same. Use the threat of the other to centralize self-power. Real peace would mean a multipolar world where superpowers are no longer special. That is their greatest fear. A superpower is defined by its ability to protect others from a threat. If there is no threat, there is no superpower. History is a graveyard of empires that lost their enemy and then lost their way. The enemy factory is the ultimate survival mechanism. It is the only way for a global power to stay relevant in a changing world. So, the next time you hear a superpower talk about an existential threat or an evil empire, ask yourself one question. Who benefits from this fear? Who gains the right to lead, to tax, and to build when we are all afraid of the dark? Real, lasting peace would require these powers to dismantle their entire global architecture. It would mean giving up their seat at the top. And that is why the factory will never stop. It will keep churning out new villains for as long as it needs to stay the hero. Because in the world of global powers, an enemy is more than a threat. It is a lifeline. The only thing more expensive than a war is a peace that makes you obsolete. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more upcoming interesting videos.